So I'm here, really, Julia Trustrameve, who looks after English wine producers, she got herself double booked, so she emailed me when I was away and said, could I please stand in for her. So I've given up my Wednesday bridge game to be here for no fee, and it's a pleasure of meeting you lovely folks. As you heard, I'm a viticulturist myself, and I've been involved with the English wine business since 1973. Yes, you did get that right. It's almost 40 years. And I make my living, and have always made my living, by either making wine, growing grapes, helping people do both of those activities. Plus I write. That's the 4th edition of that publication, and I've written a few others as well. There's not a lot I don't know about English wine. Usually we have, I'm going to be quite quick because I know the time's limited. Usually we have a whole day on labelling, so 20 minutes is not really a lot. And I haven't got a PowerPoint, so anything you want to write down. But wine is, it's always been regulated. As you heard, this whole thing stems from the AOC. Wine is one of the oldest categorised, regulated products. The French have started it. It's really a restraint of trade, is what labelling is. It stops people making Chablis outside Chablis. It stops people making Rioja outside Rioja. And unfortunately, the regulations have been written, for the wine regulations certainly, have been written by the producers, for the producers, on behalf of the producers. So the whole thing is, to a certain extent, has been seen from a producer's point of view. So Champagne, of course, is a very powerful region, probably the most productive, the most profitable, 44,000 hectares of vines, very near Paris, lots of clout. No wines throughout the EU, I'm only talking about the EU, of course, no wines throughout the EU can be sweetened with sugar or can have acidity added to them after fermentation. You can do both of those things with Champagne. So this is, the regulations have been written for the benefit of producers. However, of course, it does restrict wines that have been made in a certain way, from a certain region, from certain grape varieties, and with certain attributes. They are protected. And so to that extent, it has helped, it will continue to help increase the quality. And again, that's a good thing from the consumer's point of view. But it is a very long, slow process. Now, wine, going back to English wine, I should first of all say that please beware, there is a thing called British wine, or British-made wine, which is wine made in Britain from imported grape concentrate. It needs to be 30%, it can only be 30% grapes, the rest can be apple juice, whatever you want, and it's called British wine. It occupies a very small shelf, or a very large shelf down the bottom of the supermarket aisles, and has nothing whatsoever to do with English, Welsh, or Irish, or, Northern Irish or Scottish wine. Wine is, if it's just on its own, it has to be made from fresh grapes. Freshly fermented, freshly harvested grapes. They can be partially dried, but essentially they're not. They're all freshly made grapes. If it's called apple wine, or blackcurrant wine, or rhubarb wine, or anything else wine, it's obviously wine made from that particular fruit or vegetable. So wine, when we talk about wine, it is a product that's typically between 7.5 or 8.5% alcohol, rising to about 15. Much over 15, it's typically fortified, which is a fortified wine, it's a completely different category. Then we have still wine, and of course we have nowadays much more sparkling wine, talking about the UK. When we joined, before we joined the common market, that was in 1973, I was not interested in wine, and I don't know quite what the labelling was then, but I'm sure it was pretty lax. 73 came along, and of course prior to that we had to go into the whole regulation business for English wine. English wine and Welsh wine. When I say English wine, I'm including Welsh wine. There is no Scottish wine as yet. There is no Northern Irish wine as yet. It may come. So when we joined the common market in 73, we had a list of grape varieties we could use. We had a list of other things that we could do and couldn't do. Could we switch it off? Do you mind?
Can we all switch on mobile phones?
And there's a clear distinction between two categories of wine. We have still wine and we have sparkling wine. Now to start with, we only had still wine regulations, and it was all table wine. the categories of wine in the EU go from table wine via what we call regional wine, which you might know as Van der Pey or Länderwein or IGT in Italy, I think it is, which is an enhanced table wine. So it's still a table wine, but it's an enhanced table wine. We then have quality wine. That's still wine. On the sparkling wine side, we have, unfortunately, a bit of confusion, because any wine, any table wine that is made sparkling by a particular method can become quality sparkling wine. It doesn't refer to the wine, it refers to the method of sparkling. So we have a table wine which is sparkling, and it's called quality sparkling wine. And we now have, thanks to the new regulations, we now have a quality sparkling wine which is the subject of a PDO. That is a very new category in the UK. So with the still wine, we have say, basic level of table wine, which unfortunately in the change of regulations, they can now use the word English or England on the label. This wasn't the case until this new PDO, PGI thing came in, which I think is detrimental. But unfortunately, powers that be decided that because England is often thought of as a separate country, which of course all you people here know is not the case, it's a region, they decided that the word produce of England could be used instead of the word produce of the United Kingdom. And what we had under the old regulations was a slight power. If you wanted to call your wine English, you had to put your wine through one of the schemes, which meant your wine was tested and tasted. Unfortunately now this is not the case. So the very basic category of table wine is a product that is made to certain regulations. I mean, there's a whole host of regulations which you have to make for consumer safety, alcohol levels, acidity levels, all kinds of things like that, great varieties. The Wine Standards branch of the Food Standards Agency has a website, and it's all on there if you want to download any regulations. So that's a basic table wine. We then have, as I say, the second category, which is enhanced table wine. This is now called a varietal wine. That's a wine that that does go through a very, very basic testing and tasting procedure. So we have a varietal wine. That's a table wine which has got enhanced qualities. It has to have a slightly higher alcohol level at harvest. It can have certain things done to it which a table wine can't have done to it. So that is allowed to use the term regional wine. That is our descriptor for, if an English regional wine, that's our descriptor for this enhanced quality category of table wine. We then move into the quality wine. That wine is a PGI.
This wine that we're tasting?
The category of wine I'm talking about.
Sorry.
This is a sparkling wine.
Right.
Yeah. So the varietal wine is a category of PGI wine. Then we move into what we call quality wine, which is a PDO wine. We don't really use these terms PDO and PGI because the schemes already existed, if you like. Most of our producers will not use the little labels. They're a fiddle to put on. I'm sure you have to buy them. People don't like incorporating them into their labels. If it becomes
will they have to in the same way as the food people will?
It may happen, obviously, if it happens. But by and large, little stickers are an anathema to producers because they have to be actually physically applied. People's labelling machines normally won't. It's a difficult thing. So we have this quality wine which have the name of a region on it. It can be Devon, could be Cornwall, could be East Anglia. Obviously, it has to come from that region. We have there's an 85-15 rule which pervades the whole of wine labelling. So by and large, if a product says it's English, it could be 85% English and 15% Welsh. If it says it's 2010, it could be 85% 2010 and 15% of a different vintage. Same with the grape variety. If it says Chardonnay, it could be 85-15 Chardonnay and not Chardonnay. But that's the general rule which pervades almost every aspect of wine production. So the quality wine, the English quality wine, still wine, that has to go through a testing and tasting procedure. The testing is pretty good. It's a good standard. Every bottle has to go, well, not every bottle obviously, but a batch, 4 bottles. You have to send in 4 bottles from the wine, of course. Has been, we wonder sometimes. And it goes through a tasting. We call it a no-fault tasting. So it's not really sort of gold, silver and bronze medal type of tasting. It's a tasting we say, right, is this wine fit for purpose? Does it meet these sort of basic quality levels? So that's the still wine side. Now, the really interesting category for English wine producers now is sparkling wine. As I'm sure anybody who's been alive in the last 18 months, lived through the Royal Wedding, Jubilee, the Olympics, terrible weather, will have read a news story about English wine, English or Welsh wine. The acreage has doubled since 2004. We've gone from, I mix hectares and acres up, so don't worry. We've gone from we were about 1,000 hectares in the 90s. It then fell to about 700. But since the magic year 2003, which was very, very hot, if you can all remember that lovely summer, the acreage has doubled from 750 hectares to today's total of about 1,500 hectares. The Wine Standards branch, or Wine Standards Board as we tend to call them, they're actually the Wine Standards branch of the FSA. They keep the vineyard register. If you go on their website, you can download a list of all the commercial vineyards in the country. There's about 400 and odd of them.
Do you mean in the UK?
In the UK, yeah. England and Wales. Yeah, I've got 3 in Scotland, none in Northern Ireland. I've got on my database, because I'm rewriting this book, I'm just finishing 580 or 590 vineyards. It goes from the 7 vines planted on the top of an office block south of the river, Decanter magazine, which is a bit of a joke, but through patches this size in people's allotments, through the biggest in the country, which is Nye Timber, which has 140 hectares. So that's big, in about 6 different sites. So they do range quite from the very sublime to the quite ridiculous in terms of size. They're spread all over the country. You've got a map there which gives you pretty good view of where they all are. The further north they go, the worse the wine gets. It is unfortunately a factor of the sunshine. If we still owned Calais as a country, I'm sure we'd be growing grapes there.
But I met a Yorkshire producer the other day, and he's got a little microclimate.
Oh, they always say that.
They always say that. Do they? I did taste the wine. I don't think it tasted as good as they said it.
Oh, there we are.
Sorry, Joan.
Yeah, no.
As we were talking about using quantitative terminology, the definition, let's start again, the definition of quality wine here means absence of faults rather than any positive organoleptic sort of identified qualities, does it?
Well, the term quality is defined in its analytical sense. So we look at it from an analytical point of view, say whether it meets certain parameters, which will give it in itself certain qualitative attributes. And then it's tasted. It does have to meet a certain level of quality. The wines do get rejected on the grounds of the tasting.
Oh, really?
Oh,
Okay.
obviously.
Okay.
Yeah, it wouldn't be having one otherwise.
Well, I don't know. I mean, you were talking
No, it's not
about
quite a shoe-in. No, it's a couple. We are a bit. Yeah. I mean, it's one. I don't know how many of the food-based products go through a
I
tasting.
presume none, but I don't know. Is that Amy able to answer that?
It's not part of the requirement.
No, I
No.
don't think so.
No.
So
This is an interesting point of view.
Yeah. Well, wine's all about the taste. Isn't it?
I would hope food is as well, but hey.
Sorry.
I said I would hope food is as
Yeah,
well.
but unfortunately, that's a step too far for manufacturers, I suspect. But fortunately, wine has always been in the taste, and so it does. I mean, there is one big elephant in this room of labelling, in that we have always grown varieties of vine which are called hybrids. They are crossings between 2 species of vitis. The genus vitis has many different species within it. Vitis vinifera is the wine grape species that will account for 99% all wines. But there are these crossbred or hybrids, which are crosses of usually American vines, not always, and European vines. We've grown one in this country called Seyvar Blanc, CVR 5276, which we've grown since the 50s. It performs very well here. It's about the only variety this year that's giving us a decent crop. Unfortunately, it being a hybrid, it's from the 1930s. It's an old hybrid. Modern hybrids get pushed through. the Germans worked out how to do it. So modern hybrids, which the Germans grow, where they produce them, they produce the original plants. They're getting those all classified as vicis vinifera. Unfortunately, the old hybrids are not allowed to be included in quality wine schemes. So Sauvignon Blanc is our third most widely grown still wine varietal. It appears in more vineyards than any other variety, yet it cannot be made into quality wine. So this is a slight problem. They are talking now, however, of giving the member states the permission to do what they want in that respect. So it could be that we'll get that hybrid. I hope I lived long enough. But tasting is yes, definitely. The analytical is quite important. It sets standards of extract, of the alcohol, acid, sulfur levels, copper, iron, protein, tartrate stability, microbes, bacteria, yeast. So it's quite good. And it has weeded out a lot of what's happened is, of course, producers have actually had to up their game, improve their bottling techniques, improve their filtration, making sure they're not adding too much sugar, making sure they are picking at the right levels. So it has helped over the last 20 years. Since 1990, when we had the first quality wine scheme, it's definitely helped. So that's still wines, really. And I think we should get these wines going
Can you
up.
talk about the wines we've seen, Stephen?
Well,
Just to give us a...
Yeah, this is
the Sainsbury's
one.
Yeah.
taste the difference.
This is I think this is a Denbigh's wine, I believe. Yeah, it's a Denbigh's wine. So it's 2007. It's made from it's a classic champagne blend of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Meunier. Chardonnay and Pinot are now the two most widely grown varieties in the UK. Account for around about 60%, or the sparkling wine varieties account for about 60% of the total hectarage. They account for by far and away the biggest portion of our yields, because the vineyards tend to be more modern, better looked after, better managed and so forth. So sparkling wine varieties are definitely becoming the thing in the UK.
Where's this one made?
Where?
Yeah.
Denbigh's in Dorking, sorry. The grapes may or may not come from the grapes may or may not come from their vineyards. They do buy grapes in.
From where? Anyway.
From the UK.
Other UK vineyards, yeah. Now, you're not allowed to, English or Welsh wine has to be 100% English or Welsh grapes. But you can, unlike you can make the product in a contiguous region. So you can make English wine in Wales and Welsh wine in England. But if we had Northern Ireland as a region, you couldn't make English wine you couldn't make English or Welsh wine in Northern Ireland. We were going to have East Anglia, South East, West Midlands, we were going to have 5 big regions. But somebody worked out, of course, that if you were growing your grapes in Kent, you wanted to have them wine made in Gloucestershire, that couldn't be quality wine. So the word contiguous means you can make Welsh wine in England and vice versa. That's important. A lot of Welsh growers have their wine made at 3 Priors Winery, which is in England. So it can cross border. But the product, if it says Welsh, it has to be 100% Welsh. So where was I? So that's still quality wine. So I think it's greatly improved the quality of wine over the last 20 years, and I've no doubt that it will carry on. It will carry on doing that, especially if we can get Sauvignon Blanc, this hybrid, into the quality wine scheme. Now on the sparkling side, which is really the sort of more interesting, we survived for years without a quality wine scheme for sparkling wine. Even though it was called quality sparkling wine, nobody looked at it, nobody tested it, nobody tasted it. It was allowed to be called quality sparkling wine. And it differed from sparkling wine, which can be tank method. There are about 7 different systems of making sparkling wine, from gas injection, through tank fermentation in various different types, through what's called the Russian continuous method, which I won't bore you with, through to the traditional method, the bottle fermented method. There's an intermediate one which is called the transfer method. So sometimes you see it says bottle fermented, but it doesn't say fermented in this bottle. So they ferment it in, it's quite a different. It's fermented in magnums, usually double-sized bottles, transferred under pressure to a tank, filtered, and then put back into bottles of the right size. Pretty well all half bottles of champagne are made by transfer method. Because actually doing the biz in a half bottle is a complete pain in the neck. Likewise, the big bottles, Magnums not usually, but although very often Magnums are made from two single-sized bottles. But certainly the bigger bottles, you know, the ones you see like that, they're all made by transferring from a Magnum into those bottles. They don't actually do the work, do the business in those bottles.
Do you think that affects the quality of it then?
No, I don't think it does. No, it's done properly. No. So every bottle of sparkling wine made by the traditional method. It will say traditional method. We used to be able to call it method champenoise, but no longer. Traditional method. People call it method anglaise. You know. But that is an actual fermentation vessel capable of holding 12 bars of atmosphere, same as a London bus in their tyres. It will only have 6 bars when you open it. So each bottle is an individual fermentation. So you always have to remember that in sparkling wine. The quality sparkling wine, so the quality sparkling wine, as I say, has to be on lees, has to be in the bottle for 9 months, which is better than 6 months for just straight sparkling wine. There is also semi-sparkling wine and pétillant and, you know, things like Asti and Prosecco and that sort of stuff. But we're not talking about that. This is, you know, properly fermented stuff in the bottle. And the PDO we've got now, there are two, so we've got 2 categories of PDO. One is going to be called traditional, and one will just be called English quality sparkling wine PDO. And then there'll be English quality sparkling wine traditional method PDO, and it will have the PDO or protected designation of origin on it. That is the traditional method is restricted. The traditional one is restricted to certain grape varieties: Chardonnay, Pinot Noir, Meunier, a couple of other Pinot Blanc, Pinot Noir, a Pinot Gris, and another Pinot which you don't need to worry about. So it's restricted to certain quality varieties, which we've determined are the varieties that give the best quality wine. All these PDO quality sparkling wines will go through a testing and tasting procedure, which I say is brand new for sparkling wine. And they will be labelled as such. So that is something which is very new. I don't know. This is too. Oh, that's not. This is.
It's 2009, I think, isn't it?
Yeah, this is too. Yeah, it's too early to be too old. Most sparkling wines, as you probably know, sit on what we call it sur lie, sit on the lees in the bottle. Everyone know the sparkling wine method, process method? Yeah, you make still wine, you put it in the bottle with 26 grams of sugar per litre plus some yeast, put a crown cap on top, and it goes bubbles, bubble, bubble, and produces CO2, extra alcohol, and a bit of heat. CO2 remains in there, as does the alcohol, and the heat dissipates, and you end up with your sparkling wine. It then sits for anything from, well, it must be 9 months by law in the UK for the quality product, but of course with a wine like, Nye Timber, who's the biggest producer, selling in 2003, that's been, you know, they would have bottled that in 2004. It's been, you know, 8-9 years on the lees. There is no, I mean, I've got some 2000 Magnums which are sat there, and I'm going through them. And then slowly. I bought 6 2000s and 6 2001s, and I'm just going to party in a few weeks' time. So I got 2 disgorged, as we say, to the yeast taken out. But they're such fabulous wines. I think they'll be good for another 10 years. So sparkling wine can live for a huge length of time, because obviously with 6 bars of pressure in there and a crown cap on the top, completely hermetic, under 6 bars of pressure it deteriorates very, very, very slowly because there's no oxygen in there. So the only deterioration is the sort of slow aging process, and they've pulled stuff from the bottom of oceans, and it's been as good as it was 100 years ago.
Which I guess too is why people give people bottles of champagne as presents for things that they won't keep, you know, the bottle of wine from your 21st or the...
We were always getting people come into my shop when I had the chapel, what is now Chapel Down as ours, and they'd say, oh, I've got a bottle of wine in my things from my wedding, you know, it's a lovely. But I mean, once it's off the lees, it doesn't really get any better. No. So it needs to be on the yeast for it to continue to improve. So that first one was Sainsbury's offering. It sells for about £19.99. Most good English sparkling wines are about the same price as champagne.
How much is this one?
This is £24.95. So slightly cheaper than Moet. You know, Moet's about £28, £29 in most places. English sparkling wine is the same price as champagne because it's as good as champagne. It's also in very short supply. There's been a huge demand, and with Waitrose we're talking about thousands. Can I say Waitrose in this building? Talking about 1,000% increase in sales over the Jubilee, and you know some of it will have stuck. So, and supply is in very short supply, as it were. We're only producing in the whole country about 1.5 million bottles of sparkling wine at the moment for sale. There's an extreme disconnect between production and sales, of course, because you've got the buffer of stock in the middle, and growers will quite naturally seek a market for the highest price, and you know they'll try and hang on to it as long as possible, especially with a couple of vintages I've had this year and last year, which is they're not terribly big.
There's a contentious legend, isn't there, that champagne process was actually invented in England?
Well, how long have we got? Yeah, I mean, there's in 16 something, the king, I think it was Charles II, declared that there was too much wood was being used for charcoal for firing glass and other kilns. So he forbade the use of it, and so everyone started using, in effect, coal. Coal, the shipments from Newcastle came down, so coal was started to use. You get a much higher temperature with coal. So English glass was much stronger, especially when they started using additives for colour. This Bristol blue glass. So there was this stuff called the verre anglaise, the English glass, which was much stronger. If you went down to champagne cellars even as late as the sort of 1920s, in August, they gave you a steel face mask because the bottles would be exploding. They would typically lose 30 or 40% of all product because the bottles were of a in different quality. So English glass was very strong, and we've got recorded instances. And there was this guy called Christopher Merritt who gave a paper at the Royal Society, the newly formed Royal Society in 1660 something, in which he talks about our vintners adding a walnut of sugar to the bottle, putting the cork in, tying it on with some string to create the sparkling wine. And I've got an old sales bill from Champagne which shows Champagne still and Champagne sparkling. Champagne was not the sparkling product we all think of it as today. And so certainly cider makers were making sparkling wine long before Dom Perignon got out of bed. So there is some evidence that I had this argument with a guy at the weekend that we were in Germany doing a sparkling wine symposium. He says it's the Italians, and then the people in the south of France say it was them. And, Claret de Die, they claim they got the first. So there is a long history of making sparkling alcoholic products before Dom Perignon got into the game. And I think England has as much acclaim as France, certainly. So back to labelling. I mean, I've told you about British wine. Ingredient listing we don't really have except for sulfites. At the moment, ingredient listing is probably coming, unfortunately. Most wines are just grape juice. They have yeast added, which of course gets taken out. They often have sugar added in the northern hemisphere, in the northern part of the northern hemisphere, which gets converted into alcohol, indistinguishable from natural alcohol. They occasionally have a bit of acidity added, and they have sulfur added, sulfur dioxide, which is of course the preservative. In southern hemisphere, wines tend to have a lot more acidity added, but then of course they don't use sugar. So I think wine is actually a very natural product. There are of course wines which are made using one of the many hundreds of permitted additives, but that's by and large to correct a fault or correct some imbalance rather than for flavour altering. You're not allowed to add flavourings. You can use oak in various forms. You can use colouring in various forms as well. You can use tannin, which is a natural part of grapes anyway, but doesn't usually come from grapes, the tannin you add. But it's a pretty natural product, I think. And I mean, that's about the story, really. I mean, if anyone's got any questions. I mean, there's a whole day's seminar on this I can do.